Okay, so this tutorial is going to be mostly on working with some short videos, typically mp4 video files. Actually, it doesn't matter really. Once it's in Howler, it doesn't matter in what format it was before it came in. But we have a video here that I want to dissect a little bit and show some examples of things that could go bad and how to fix them. Essentially, we'll be focused on using the right click and doing things like extrapolate this frame if it's a single frame that needs to be replaced with something that's interpolated from the neighboring frames, the preceding and the following frame, or a whole block of it, right? But before we get to that, how do we get this video in there in the first place? And then we'll take a look at what are the problems with the video. So this one was in an mp4, and we have an import of a couple of formats. We can load an AVI or a section, a portion of it. We can load an image sequence, but we cannot load, and we can export to media, which includes mp4, right? And a couple of versions of the WMV, but we do not have an import yet of mp4. So how do you work with that if you have an mp4? You need to first convert it to something different, and you want to try not to get any more lossy information there. You don't want to lose any frames, even though what you're trying to do is probably do exactly that. These are bad frames. You want to lose them or replace them, fix them in some way. But the problem is when you convert it, you really want to make sure you still have the same number of frames, the same frames, that they don't get blurry, that they don't get lossy, that they don't represent a completely different image than what you see in mp4. And of course, mp4 is lossy in itself. So one thing you can do is quite often some of the video converters also have options to extract the frames. So you convert it actually to an image file sequence. And that's really what you should do, converting it to an image format that is lossless itself, like PNG or TIFF. Don't save it to JPEG unless you don't see the difference. If it's very noisy image to begin with, JPEG will be doing fine. You probably won't see a whole lot more noise. But if it's clean, some strict lines, high contrast, black on white, stuff like that, you probably will do better if you keep the frames in their original pixel sets as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is just show how I convert that, because I don't have many tools to do that, and I bet there's tons of tools. If you have the Adobe suite, you probably have ways to convert it to something really usable as an image sequence. I actually use an old version of QuickTime Pro for Windows. I'm on Windows, of course, with Howler, and I still have the QuickTime Pro, so I can load an mp4 and then save it out or export it as an image sequence. Let's take a look at how I do that. Okay, so here is my browser, and I have this video, a little preview here. If I open it, it's probably going to open in a different Windows player, like the one that comes with Windows, and we can see there's a couple of issues with it, right? If we loop it, if we play it, there's flashes, there's different backgrounds, there's some white color, some black color, there's a bunch of things we don't like about it. So I'm going to switch to QuickTime here and simply drag and drop that right. Nope, that doesn't seem to work. So I guess I need to go to the file menu and import that or open that. Let's see what the options are. Open file, that should probably work. Let's use that. Yep, and here it is. Let's go and load that mp4. Alright, so what does QuickTime show? I don't need this initial view anymore. What does QuickTime show me on that? I can play it. And it's not necessarily in the original size. I may want to worry about that, right? If it's super big, it may not even fit on my screen. So be aware of that. There's a couple of view options to see it at half size, to see it at normal size. That should tell you, okay, that's the actual size. And so that's good. Double size, too big for my screen here, and really no need for that anyway. So what I'm going to do is simply go and export it back. All right, so export. Now there's a couple of options, but I have the export here, and there's a couple of ways to export it. Let's see. So I'm going to export it to the same folder as where this one came from, but I'm going to save it to an image sequence. So I might as well create a folder where all these images will be collected. If you don't do that, that's fine, but it'll be easily a mess at some point, right? And you may even risk overriding one image sequence with another or something like that. It'll be difficult to navigate and find the images. So one thing I'll do here is re-export it, something like that. What is it? My Media, not a very intuitive name. So I might actually put in there also in what format it is, in case I export it to several formats. I might do a PNG sequence, I might do a TIFF. So here I'm going to do something like PNG. All right, and assuming that we actually have that option. Off the top of my head, I don't remember if we do. But so here's the file name and save as type. So now here is where you have a chance to actually say at what you want to save it as, and certainly first here what export format you want, and that's of course the magic trick here. You could go perhaps with AVI. I don't know if it even have it. Yep, there it is. But it may not have the codecs that you want, so it may not be able to keep the dimensions or the compression as you need it, or no. Well, there's probably an option for uncompressed. I would not necessarily think that that's the best, but if you save it to AVI and Howler can then load that particular codec you used, then you're fine as well. That will probably also be worth exploring. I'm going to go straight to the image sequence though, and there's a couple of options here. Use the most recent settings, right? Once you've figured out what works for you, you probably want to just keep using that, and that's really one thing I like a lot about this particular program, is that it makes it a little bit easier once you figured it out. So what are the options here? You could save it to a JPEG, you could save it to a bunch of other formats, of course a couple of Mac formats, because this came from Mac OS or from Apple. It's the Windows version of it though, and I'm going to go with PNG, because that's nowadays really one of the most prevalent formats if you want it without compression, without lossy. You don't want it lossy. Frames per second. Now, so that's important. You need to know at what frame rate your video is supposed to be playing. If it is a 24 frames per second, there's no point in saving it 30 frames per second, because you'll be introducing some blended tween images, right? And so sometimes that actually helps. Sometimes it's better to have more than what you really needed, but you might be losing some frames as well, depending on what it is. So best is probably automatically determining it. I don't even know that for sure. I'm just going to go with the 24 because I'm pretty sure I actually had it saved as 24 when it was first recorded. So at that point, that means every frame I have will probably be found and not modified any further. There's insert a space before the number, right? So the image sequence will show a base name and then add a number like 001, 002, 003. Do you want that to be separated by an extra dash or space or underscore or something like that? I will say no, let's not add a space. Instead, when I give it the name, I'll put an underscore behind the base name. So it will have the base name and underscore, and then whatever that number, that running number sequence is, should be added to that. I like to keep it so that there is no spaces between them. But yeah, for some software, depending on where you take it later, if you take it into, I don't know, After Effects or QuickTime Pro, whatever it is on the Mac, if you take it somewhere else, you might, that software might prefer to have a separation between the main file name and the running number. All right, so more details on the PNG. You want to make sure you have it not as a grayscale or reduced color or something like that. Keep it millions of colors. Best depth will probably do just fine too, but if you want to force it millions of colors, that will be 24-bit deep, right? Red, green, blue channels, each at 8 bits. This one here, millions of colors plus, would be useful if you also have an alpha channel in your video, if you have a transparency mask that moves with it. And that is in theory possible, but it's not what I have here. And it's not something that Howler will load automatically in a single upload. You can, however, work something like that if you keep the alpha channels separate from the RGB channels and then load them, store them, and recombine them. There is a ways to do that. We'll probably take a look at how to do that. So for now, I'm going to go with millions of colors. Filter. Not sure exactly what that does. There's probably some options on image processing. Maybe none. We'll just, I don't know, what is it? Best, none. You know what? I have no idea what it is. So probably need to Google search it for what these actually do. Maybe it's some type of compression that PNG might use. I'm going to say none because I don't know what that might introduce. And is it interlaced? No, I don't want interlaced graphics here. That's something you might do if you are on old video with interlaced video, odd frames and odd lines, and then alternating with even lines and odd lines and so on. But so here we go. It's not interlaced. It's millions of colors. Let's go with that. And I think I'm pretty much set here. I just need to give it a base name here, re-exported my media PNG. I need to go into that folder because that's where I want that image sequence. And then here I could call it something like just frame underscore, right? And I know it's going to add the number, so it'll be frame 0, frame 1, frame 2, or 000, 001, 002, 003, etc. I don't know exactly how many it's probably gonna do 4 or 5 digits. And it might even be depending on, well, how many frames I actually have, right? I should try that someday. See if I only have double digits number of frames, like up to 99 frames, if it's actually showing a number that's only going with 2 digits. No idea. Anyway, this is good enough. We save it to an image sequence. We have set the options. This is where we want it. Let's go do that. And here we go. So now each of these frames are being extracted and saved out to its own file, its own PNG image file. And once it's done, we can close all this and go take a look at this. And sure enough, we now have an image sequence, right? And there are some good images as we double-click to open them in Irfan View to preview them or not. But there's also some bad ones. We knew that. That's why we're doing this exercise. There were some bad frames, and glad to see them here. Right? They were supposed to be extracted, and then we can decide what to do with them or about them. So one thing we'll do is we now load this back into Howler, and that's an image sequence we can load, and then we can see and work with it, and we do that next. Alright, so here I am back. I actually had created this video initially in Howler to begin with, just to simulate what if I have a bad video. No pun intended there, no, not really. So what I'm going to do is actually get rid of this, or at least store it aside here to disk. So just in case I want to get back to that, maybe do a comparison between this one and the one that got exported from QuickTime. And so here I'm going to say, let's lose this one. And now we are kind of even in a different dimension, different sizes, right? So now we are really in the scenario where you say, okay, hold on. I have an image sequence, not a mp4. I cannot load mp4, but I can load a sequence. So let's go do that. The interface for image sequence here is going to be a little bit special. It's actually using the ImageMagick interface, I believe, to grab the files, to put them in, the images. I need to find the folder containing them, right? So if I scroll to the top, no, it's not in my Dropbox. This should be, oh, it's probably further scroll down here. Steam tutorials, if I remember. Steam tutorials, there it is. And mp4 videos. Okay, so here's an mp4, right? But I wanted to have actually go down to the subdirectory. There it is. There's a subfolder that was created. So make sure you expand that, and then you see here my PNG images. And yes, sure enough, it got 3 digits because I have 100 and something frames. and 121, right, from 01 to 121. And so I can do a click and then a shift click to select more. And what I would recommend is perhaps start with one and just two or three or so. Give it a handful. Don't load them all, just to get a feel for how much time it takes to load them. Will it work? Is there anything unexpected happening? If it's a different format, you might not see them depending on your filter here. Right? If you're looking for bitmap, you're not going to see the PNGs. Of course, sometimes that's exactly what you want. You have a different format also in that folder, and you just want to filter down to the one format of interest. But right now we're going to do this. Eventually we'll shift click here to select them all, but right now we'll do just like from here to about so, and load selected. So each of the frames comes in. That's good. So that's a good start. Now we can do the real thing, which is go back here and load sequence. You could free this up first if you want to free some memory, but it's only a little bit, so it will do that fine probably on the fly. Let's go load sequence once more. We're still in the same folder, and that makes it nice and quick and easy. And so we'll select click here, shift click here, and then select that. So all of these, this will first free the current animation. Let's go for it, and then load all of these frames, and with all the bad frames that came with it. And that's it. Voila, we now have the frame sequence that used to be in an mp4 because we exported them to an image sequence. And yeah, unfortunately, you still need that, right? At some point, maybe even Windows comes with an option. Check the details in what is it, Photo Viewer or Photo Editor, and then there's a movie player. There's a couple of tools that come with Windows 10 nowadays, and there's probably plenty of other options to extract the frame sequence from your video. So gotta do that. I have a tool that I like to keep using because even though it's ancient, right? QuickTime, I don't know if they even still make it, but QuickTime Pro, paid the license about 20 years ago and it's still working. So kudos to that. Not sure if it's kudos to Apple or to Windows or both together. It's still working, that's the point, and you can work with that to create image sequence out of an MP4. Of course, you lose the audio. If there was an audio in the first place, we're only focusing here on the image sequence. Later on, once you've fixed what you need to fix here, you save it back out either as an image sequence once more, or as an AVI, or of course as the media that you had initially, the MP4. You can do an export media again and save it back to MP4. All of that goes without saying, and we will do that next. Let's move on with the next steps.